The topics what we are going to cover today is Azure versus AWS services, the terminology, what are they? And the different ways to connect to remote PCs, and what is an identity, Azure Active Directory, and multi-factor authentication. These are some of the topics that has been lined up for today. To begin with, we have the services. There are over 200 plus services available in Azure. Okay, and why this slide here? Since most of us had undergone a training in more than one cloud vertical with one cloud service provider, of course, often it will be a little bit confusing. In one place, we'll be referring to virtual machine, and in another place, we'll be referring to EC2, that is Elastic Compute Cloud in AWS. And further, if we go to Google Cloud, it will be different. So just to have a common understanding and to be on the same page, all of us. So that's the reason this slide has been prepared. And let's see some of the nomenclature, some of the naming terminology, what we refer to. In case of Microsoft Azure, we refer to as virtual machines. The same thing here in AWS, it is referred to as EC2. Similarly, we have auto scaling in AWS. The same thing we refer it to as virtual machines in Azure. And container instances, Kubernetes services, here it is called as AKS in Azure, that is Azure Kubernetes Service, whereas in AWS, it is Elastic Kubernetes Service. Okay, and further we have functions, and here we have Lambda. There are so many services that has been lined up, and let us not go in detail, in depth on each and everything. You can just have a quick look, and we will move on. So we are on the second slide. Are we good to go with this as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here I was able to line up the very important thing that most of us will be using on a daily basis. What is all about an identity? Okay, so an identity is a thing that can get authenticated. So an authentication is, simply said, a process of verification of identity in their request. So if a user is sending a request for login, a service need to verify on whether the request is a proper request and that request is actually sent by that specific user. So here, an identity itself can be a user with a username and a password, or it can also be an application or other services that comes with secret keys or secret access keys or the certificates. So here we have a pictorial presentation of that. Here you can see the first picture onto the left side, a classic approach. So this is what generally we had seen in most of the cases. If you're logging into your desktop version software, particular application, what happens? You will log into that application. The moment you log in, it will ask for the username and password. And you will type the username and password, and it gets authenticated with the help of the database. The backend, there is a database. And first, the client, that is you, the user will log into that application, and the server will ask for username and password. Enter your username and password. You just take the example of simple our Gmail. Correct? Gmail. The moment you log in, it'll the Facebook, it'll ask for the username and password. You will punch in the username and the password, and this password information is sent to the server. It gets authenticated. How it gets authenticated? The server will send those details to the database, the backend database. It could be SQL database, Oracle database. There, the username and the password is verified. Suppose that username does not exist. What it says, either the username and password what you have typed is not matching. Please check. Correct? Yes. This approach is called a traditional way of approach called classic approach. So there is another approach other than this classic approach. Classic approach is the general, in general, which is there by and large. And there is another approach which is used in traditional secured environment where corporate companies, they operate. What is that secured way? It is identity provider used through Active Directory. Okay, so Active Directory is the one that is provided by Microsoft Azure. So here you can see there are multiple level of identity exchange as well as verification, and this will be a continuous process. It is not like here in classic approach. What happens? The client will log into the trying to log into the server. You can see in the first gray type, the gray arrow here. So the server is asking for the username and password. The client provided the username and password. That username password is got verified with the backend database. Once the confirmation is received by the server, there is a connection established between the client and the server. Correct? And the work is started. Whereas here you can see first the client is sending the punching in the username and password in the first level. Okay, and Azure identity, it goes through the Azure identity. It does not go directly to the server. First, here it goes to the server through like this. Okay, so first a client is trying to log into this server through Active Directory. So the Active Directory will take a token. It will create a token and it will exchange with the server, and it will do the verification process. So every time it has to go through the Active Directory, come here, get authenticated, then come here to the client. So only then the client is allowed to log in back to the server. So where do we see this Active Directory? If any of us worked in corporate or working in corporate environment, the moment you log into your Windows desktop screen, you will provide the username and password, right? There, your login itself is synced with LDAP. Your desktop version of Windows operating system, what you are using, if it is not linked with Active Directory, you will not be able to log in at all. That is, if your desktop version of Windows is not synced with domain, your corporate company domain, if it is not attached, you will not be able to log in. If you are in a workstation, definitely you cannot log in. First, you'll have to move on to the domain, and from there only you'll be able to log in. So the moment your computer is attached to a particular domain, your corporate entity, you are already synced with the Azure. And it is mandatory for you to have an internet connection to log in to your corporate environment. Okay, and only then the user ID password gets authenticated, and you will be able to proceed further. The similar way, even our VPN connection works. So there is a special technology called kill switch. What is this kill switch? It will be keep monitoring your connection, and at any point of time, if you're not working, if you're offline, and there is some unusual way of data exchange are happening, immediately this the kill switch will terminate your connection with the server. You'll have to log in back again. You have noticed, right? This usually happens in our banking online banking transactions. You have logged into your bank account, Citibank, HDFC, or any of the bank, and while performing activity, by mistake, you have clicked the back button in the browser. Correct? So the moment you click the back button, if you click on the forward button once again, if you try to go back to the previous screen from where you have navigated, what it says, the connection terminated, right? So you need to log in back again. How does this happen? This is consistently monitored by your Active Directory. Okay, so that is how it will protect the identity. There is every possibility that someone else, a man in the middle, it is called, someone else can come into the picture and he can steal the data, the data that is getting transferred. And another way of protecting the identity is we have observed this captcha, right, while performing any online transactions.
Yes, sir.
Yes. What is this captcha all about? It's a computer program or a system intended to distinguish human being from machine input. Correct. So it is a type of a challenge response or test or a quiz kind of thing, asking you to select multiple blocks of a specific picture or word or something. And that will determine whether the user is actually a human or an artificial intelligence or machine learning is performing that specific task on behalf of humans or superseding the human. So when we have a concept of this AI, ML, and providing everything online and trying to eliminate the human intervention, yes, of course, very much possible. We can assign a particular AI software to go and log in for 100 email accounts, try to log in. We will provide the username, and this AI artificial intelligence software, it will keep producing a new password, and it will be keep trying and keep trying to log into that account. At one point of time, it will able to match, and it will log in, and it will provide the exact credentials to the owner of that artificial intelligence. So similarly, if you take, for example, stock exchange, if you pump in money about 1 crore or something, and if you assign the task, that application software itself will do the complete trading, buying, selling, everything it will do on its own. Okay, the human need not to punch in every time, I want to sell this much, I want to buy this much. No need. So to avoid all these things, robotic things, this CAPTCHA is introduced. This is another way of assessing the identity, whether the person or a thing who have logged in is the actual user. So this is all about an identity. Why are we talking about identity? Because this is one thing that is needed when you are working in cloud. This is completely on internet, and completely it should be restricted. There should be privacy. To manage all those things, this is what introduced way back in Windows Server itself. That was in 2010. So we have something called Windows Active Directory, which is also referred to as tenants. And here there are two types of Active Directory. One is the regular Active Directory, what we see in our Windows environment, in the Windows server, and another Active Directory which exists in Azure, in the cloud. Okay, let us try to understand what is that and what is the difference. So the Azure Active Directory is the identity and access management service offered by Microsoft in Azure Cloud. So the Azure Active Directory is Microsoft's multi-tenant cloud-based directory and identity management. It's a service that combines core directory services, application access management, and identity protection into a single solution. So this is not a full-blown cloud version of Microsoft's on-premises Active Directory. So this service does act as an identity store and authentication provider in Azure Cloud. So it does not have the LDAP functionality of Active Directory or many of the other services like machine joining, the group policy objects, etc., backed by Microsoft Active Directory in their server editions. So in the server edition, what we see, the Active Directory in our corporate entity, it's a full-fledged Active Directory. You will have the username, password, you will have LDAP access. There are many features are available, out of which only 3 or 4 features has been borrowed into the cloud version of Active Directory, where our Azure cloud services are provided. So why is that? It is only needed for authentication purpose. Once again, when you are using Azure cloud, in the backend, you are getting connected to the Microsoft servers itself. So there, the full-fledged Active Directory is available, and all the services are provided from that level, from that side, not from your Azure cloud login. So as an Azure administrator, you can create multiple different Azure Active Directory, and usually it is referred to as the tenants, which operate independently. So when you create Azure resources, they will usually be tied to a specific tenant, and you can grant users in that tenant to access and manage the resources. Okay, so in simple, the Active Directory is referred to as uh, identity and access management. You will create user accounts. You will be creating, providing various user policies. You'll be setting rules. You'll be setting, and maybe even the applications. See, when we say a user here, it need not to be. It need not be a human. It can be even an application, API, application programming interface. For this application programming interface, we will be providing the name, and we will be providing the access keys. Okay, so this API, if at all, it has to fetch some data, it has to provide that access key like a password, and only then it is eligible to go and fetch the data. So that is how it works. So the usernames created in Azure Active Directory can be any one of these three types listed below. So user created and homed in one tenant. User created and homed in one tenant can be in another tenant to access resources. And Microsoft user account, which is granted access to create the tenant. So here you can see AWS, that is Amazon Web Services, also has got identity and access management. It's a full-fledged service available in AWS, but they do not have their own Active Directory services. They have borrowed from Microsoft Active Directory. So Windows Active Directory has many layers of services. So such as domain services, access control entities similar to IAM, identity and access management, lightweight access protocol. In short, we call it as the LDAP, and SSO login, that is a single sign-on. Single sign-on is one single username and password. We use it for all logins, right? First, we log into our corporate entity with a single sign-on, SSO. And from there, we want to log into our client infrastructure, client entity. Once again, we use the same username and password. So this one single username and password is synced with all the logins, whatever we have. That is what SSO. And similarly, certificate services like a .pki and right service management. These are all the default services that are available in the regular Windows Active Directory. Similarly, we have Azure Active Directory. The moment we log into our Azure console, what are all the Active Directory services that are available for us? So here we get Windows Azure Diagnostics. It is a monitoring tool and log collection service. And Windows Azure Access Control Service, similar to AWS service, and REST APIs, so similar to LDAP services. So these are all the Active Directory services that are available. So who will use Windows Active Directory, and who are the service audience by and large? So all the IT administrators who will be using this Windows Active Directory, and mainly for using SSO, that is single sign-on, to access all the applications they need for their everyday usage. And application developers who will be using, once again, they'll be using SSO to use different applications and log into different organizations. And online customers, so who are using Office 365 and CRM services. So it is these purposes wherein an Windows Active Directory is used. And once we log into our Azure portal, we can sync our Azure Active Directory into Windows Active Directory if we have a corporate network. Okay, thank you. So what is all about multi-factor authentication? Azure multi-factor authentication is a simple best practice that adds an extra layer of protection on top of your username and password. So you can enable MFA for your AWS or Azure account, and for individual IAM users that you have created. So there are generally three recognized types of authentication factors available, which is called something you know, something you have, and something you are. So what is all about something you know? This includes passwords, PIN numbers, combination of both code words or secret questions, anything that you can remember and then type or say or do, perform, or otherwise recall when it is needed. They fall into this category. What is something you know? Now you say, for example, your Gmail user account or your Facebook user account. That is what something you know. Unless you know the user ID srihari@gmail.com, you cannot log in, right? That is what something you know. You'll go to your ATM to withdraw the money, and you need to punch in the PIN number, correct? Without PIN number, you cannot withdraw the money. That PIN number is something you know. Got it?
Yes, sir.
So similarly, other than something you know, we have something called something you have. Other than something you know, we have next one, something you have. Okay, so that something you have, that includes all physical objects that you carry, such as it could be smart keys, it could be your phone, handheld devices, USB devices, or token devices. In our corporate entity, at one point of time, we have seen these devices, right? Security tokens.
RSA tokens.
Exactly. Okay. This is what something you have. Without this, you cannot log into that environment, or you cannot use that resource or service. So similarly, a debit card or a credit card, smart cards, USB security tokens, they are all something you have. And the last but not least is something you are. It includes any part of a human body that can be offered for verification, such as fingerprints, palm scanning, facial recognition, retina scans, and voice verification as well. So fingerprints are often, we use it in our handheld devices, right? Mobile phones to log in. That is what it is. So these are all the three types of authentication factors available by and large. So often we use any one of them or multiple of them for the same purpose. Say, for example, you're logging into your online bank account. First, you will provide the username and password. Then it will send a OTP. You will have to enter that OTP, correct? So only then it will enable you. So similarly, now we will enable this second layer of protection for our Azure account. Just know what we have created. All right. Shall we do that? Now, please click on next. We will be adding this multi-factor authentication layer to your account. Okay. Click on next. We'll set up whether this account is for business or for personal use. Now, open your Microsoft Authenticator on your phone and scan this image. Download and install Google Authenticator in your phone. Select use a different Authenticator app. Okay, scan the QR code in your Google Authenticator.
Just downloading it. Okay, scan the code.
Okay.
I'll say add account on this.
Yes.
Added the account. Now I'll click next.
Yes.
Enter the code.
Yes, it will ask for 2 times the code. First code you need to enter. And once you click on next, one more code, it will come usually in a Google Authenticator. Second verification. Okay, yeah, I think it is already registered.
Okay, I'll say done here.
Yes, yes. Great. So this is the, you can click on maybe later. So this is the, you can see now the default user account has been changed onto the extreme right. Satish @ whatever.
Yes, sir. Correct.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Great. Now please sign out. Okay, now log in back again with this user. So there is a second layer of protection has been enabled. Yes, click on this user. Now, do you see that? So
Yes.
without this phone going forward, you will not be able to log into this user account unless you disable this. So you need to provide this code. So this is what exactly we used to do in our corporate environment.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
You got it? This is
Yes, sir.
a multi-factor authentication that has been linked with our Active Directory. Okay, that is Azure Active Directory. We have not yet explored the Windows Active Directory yet. We can link that, we can sync it, we can work on it. So here, whatever the resources that you create, now you can see, you can create a virtual machine here, and whatever the resources that you consume, for this account, it will be billed, but it will be paid by the primary account.
Okay.
Okay, likewise, if there are 10 users, that is 10 employees working, whatever the job that they are doing, individually, you will get the billing alert, and you will get a consolidated bill separately.
Okay, sir.
Okay, and this is all about the Azure Active Directory and the multi-factor authentication.